Hello everyone, Helen here. How are you today? I hope you're okay. I'm feeling okay and I'm looking forward to taking you on another trip today. And not in the camper van this time, but I went off with my mum to the English Lake District for a few days and I'm just very excited to tell you about it. And so just before I get on with it, just to go back a bit, when I was knitting this Peter Rabbit here and finding the pattern and understanding the pattern in places quite challenging. It was definitely a big challenge. The only reason that I didn't give up on it really was that I had this little seed of an idea that wouldn't it be brilliant to take my knitted Peter Rabbit to the land of Beatrix Potter, and particularly to Hilltop Farm, which was Beatrix Potter's first home in the Lake District. So that just kept me going. So of course, then my mum and I decided we would go to the Lake District for our little holiday, and Peter Rabbit came too. And I have to confess that I just became completely overexcited about the whole thing. I was like a child. And I'm sure you'll probably pick up on that. Yes, that feeling of being a child again as I'm talking to you some of the time, telling you what we got up to. So we were travelling across to the Lake District by public transport. And you can see here the route that we were taking. A train from Newcastle across to Carlisle, then another train journey, a shorter one, much shorter one, to Penrith, and then a bus journey from Penrith to Windermere. I actually began my journey on the train from Durham, travelling just a short distance north to Newcastle, which takes about 15 minutes. Peter Rabbit was soon making his presence felt, asking to look out of the train window. At Newcastle railway station, I met up with my mum. While we were waiting for our train, my mum showed me the new bag that she'd just made for herself, and she'd made it especially to bring away on this little holiday. She followed a tutorial on YouTube, and she said it was really excellent, and just in case you're interested in it, I'll put a link in the description box to it. But she was very, very pleased with the bag, and she made a really good job of it. For the first time ever, my mum had bought her train ticket on her phone. So she was grateful for a little bit of guidance about how to find a ticket on her phone again, and then on how to use it to get through the barrier. Our train was already at the platform, but we had to wait a little while before we could board. But very soon, the train was opened and we climbed aboard, ready for our journey to Carlisle. And of course, Peter wanted to look out of the window again. The train pulled out of Newcastle station at 9:46 and we sat back to enjoy a scenic ride westwards along the Tyne Valley. we arrived spot on time in Carlisle at 11:16 and had just over 15 minutes to wait for our next train at 11:33, a shorter trip of about 15 minutes to Penrith, and that's just on the very northern edge of the Lake District. We arrived there at 11:47. Penrith is a lovely, well-kept station with several features that make it extra special. On the opposite platform to where we were, there was a lovely display of a country scene with sheep and things. And I also spotted these beautiful stones that had been painted to look like little country cottages. It's really nice. It made me want to make one as well. The weather was so mild that we sat on the platform to eat our picnic lunch because we had about an hour to wait before our bus was due. Our bus left Penrith station at 12:50 and we were in for 2 hours of picturesque countryside, heading south into the heart of the Lake District. It was a bit tricky to capture much video while I was on the bus because it was so bouncy and wobbly a lot of the time, but hopefully you can get a bit of an idea of the views that we got from the bus. Travelling firstly along the shores of Ullswater, which is the second largest lake in the Lake District at about 9 miles or 14 kilometres long. And the bus then took us along the Kirkstone Pass, which is the highest pass in the Lake District. Very soon we got our first glimpse of Windermere, glistening in the distance, and right on time at 3:20 we arrived at the bus terminus in the town of Windermere. We had a short downhill walk to the bed and breakfast where we booked a stay for 4 nights. It was called the Archway Guest House. We received a very warm welcome from our hosts Anita and Dennis, and we were well looked after for the duration of our stay with delicious breakfasts and a cosy, clean room. And we had the company of 3 friendly Herdwick sheep looking down on us from the wall. It was a very handy location for the town centre, so we just had a very short walk to find somewhere to have an evening meal. And we were really pleased with our choice, a little restaurant called the Tilly. My mum had a homemade fish cake and I had an excellent goat's cheese and caramelised onion sourdough pizza. We began the next day with a short bus journey down to Bowness because we wanted to visit the World of Beatrix Potter attraction. Bowness always seems to be buzzing with visitors. It's definitely one of the Lake District honeypots where cruises can be taken on Windermere. The World of Beatrix Potter is very well worth a visit for all Beatrix Potter fans, whether you're young or old. Everything is just so beautifully and tastefully presented. I'm sure Beatrix Potter herself would have approved because all the displays do a great justice to her illustrations and her love of the countryside. So after being taken through an introductory audio-visual with a little potted history of Beatrix Potter's life and stories, and it's short enough to hold the attention of even the youngest visitors or excited older people who just want to get into the exhibition, you follow a winding path through scenes from all of the stories by Beatrix Potter. All the backgrounds are painted or modelled in a Beatrix Potter style, so it almost feels like you're walking through her storybooks. My knitted Peter Rabbit was stunned to see an exhibition starring himself and his friends. He was determined to become part of the exhibition, and he kept slipping away and making himself quite at home in different settings, though he was a little alarmed at the model of Mr. McGregor and a scene where Peter was caught up in a net. There's an outdoor area too, a garden created with local materials, which actually won a gold medal at the 2014 Chelsea Flower Show, designed by Richard Lucas. It's got a beautiful sculpture and water feature at its centre, depicting well-known characters from the stories, as well as a couple of children, because obviously the stories were written for children. There are traditional varieties of fruit and vegetables, herbs and flowers in the garden. They're all ones that Beatrix Potter would have grown in her own garden. In Cecily Parsley's nursery rhymes, Beatrix Potter wrote a little poem about a garden. We have a little garden, a garden of our own, and every day we water there the seeds that we have sown. We love our little garden and tend it with such care, you will not find a faded leaf or blighted blossom there. Peter had a fine time exploring the potting shed, sniffing the succulent seedlings and hopefully resisting the temptation to nibble anything, though he didn't think anyone would mind if he had a little sip of water to quench his thirst. He kept an ear out just in case Mr. McGregor should appear. A sign suggested that he should take great care, and he was a little unnerved to spot a little blue jacket hanging up in the distance as a scarecrow. He located a watering can just in case he needed suddenly to find a handy hiding place. But for once he curtailed his mischievousness and simply looked wistfully through the fence upon the tasty vegetables growing there. And he tried to appreciate the beautiful array of late spring flowers, some late flowering daffodils, these gorgeous primroses, and the vibrant tulips. A section of the indoor exhibition focused on the life of Beatrix Potter, a little history of how she became the famous illustrator and author. She was born in London in 1866, and from an early age loved observing and painting the nature that she saw all around her. Her first story came about when she was writing a letter to a little boy called Noel, based around sketches of her own pet rabbit, who was called Peter. After initially publishing The Tale of Peter Rabbit privately, it was accepted by a publisher in 1902, and with the profits from the sales she bought her first farm in the Lake District, Hilltop. Sadly, her fiancé, her publisher, died only 4 weeks after their engagement in 1905. But later, a few years later, Beatrix fell in love with a local solicitor, William Heelis. And when they married in 1913, they took up residence in the same village as Hilltop, at Castle Farm. You can see Castle Farm here, the white building on the right, and Beatrix also owned the grey house on the lower left. When she died in 1943, and it was in this white house here, she'd written over 60 books and had also become a great influence on the local farming, the breeding of Herdwick sheep, and the conservation of the Lake District area where she'd made her home. My Peter Rabbit was quite awestruck when he came across a life-sized Beatrix in the exhibition, and for a few moments he lost his mischievous expression and became quite thoughtful, grateful to the lady who had brought him to life. After the excitement of the exhibition, there was a wonderful array of things to look at in the shop. So many beautiful things looking so tempting. Just about anything you could think of was illustrated with the drawings and paintings of Beatrix Potter. I just couldn't go home without any souvenirs, and I'll show you what I bought a bit later. We had some refreshments and scones in the cafe, which was very tastefully decorated in appropriate colours, and then we headed down to Bowness Pier to catch a bus to Grasmere. I decided to travel upstairs because it was an open-top bus and the weather was being very kind to us. I just wanted to take in all the lovely views along the way. The bus services in the Lake District are really excellent. They're pretty reliable and with a good frequency. People are encouraged to travel by bus rather than car because in the peak season the roads become extremely jammed up with cars, and apart from the fact that it takes ages to get anywhere, it's not good for the environment either. Some of the buses have commentaries on things to look out for on the route, and that's all for a maximum ticket price of £2 for each journey. We enjoyed views of Windermere, including this spot, which the commentary on the bus told us was the bus stop with the best view in the UK. And then we passed Rydalwater and Grasmere until eventually we arrived in the village of Grasmere. After buying some ice creams at a little hut that sold locally made ice cream, we walked to the Wordsworth Daffodil Garden to find somewhere to sit for a while. Although the daffodils were all finished, there was a good show of bluebells, and we were grateful for the mild weather, remembering that when we'd visited a couple of years previously, we'd had nothing but pouring rain. We couldn't leave Grasmere without popping into the Grasmere gingerbread shop, and I told you all about this special gingerbread in episode 105 if you want to know more about it. Back on the bus, we returned to Windermere and walked the short distance to the big Lakeland store, a real favourite shop of ours. We had a good look around the huge variety of practical or useful or simply attractive goods for sale before selecting a few things for our shopping trolley. Mostly things that we actually needed, plus some gifts and the odd treat. We woke the next morning to find that the weather had turned and the day remained dull, overcast and rather damp, though it was drizzly damp rather than pouring rain. We'd booked ourselves onto a minibus tour called Beatrix Potter's Countryside, with a well-established tour company called Mountain Goat. Our first stop was at Ray Castle, which Beatrix Potter's father had rented for a family holiday to the Lake District in 1882, when Beatrix was 16. She fell in love with the Lake District immediately. It was also here that Beatrix met Canon Rawnsley, who became a lifelong friend and mentor. It's really just a mock castle that was built in a Victorian Gothic style in 1840, and it's been owned by the National Trust since 1929. Our next port of call was the very attractive village of Hawkshead. Here, my mum and I chose to visit the Grammar School Museum, founded in 1585 by Archbishop Edwin Sandys, who wanted to provide free education of grammar for local boys. One of its main claims to fame is that the poet William Wordsworth went to school here. He started in 1779 at the age of 9 and stayed until he was 17. One of the things that struck us the most about this old schoolroom was the amount of graffiti that was carved into the wooden desks. And even William Wordsworth had joined in. His graffiti is now protected by a little frame. It's amazing to think that boys were educated here for over 300 years. I also liked the quotes painted along the top edge of the classroom walls. The main subjects that were taught were Latin, Greek and mathematics, as well as what they considered to be the true Protestant religion. And at the time that William Wordsworth attended in the 18th century, there were about 100 pupils at the school. The highlight of the day, however, was a visit to Beatrix Potter's first Lake District home, Hilltop Farm. We travelled to the tiny hamlet of Near Sawrey, passing the original letterbox where Beatrix would have posted off her manuscripts to her London publisher. There's also a unique signpost here telling drivers to watch out for Peter Rabbit. My Peter Rabbit just couldn't wait to hop out of my rucksack to do some exploration. He attracted lots of interest as I photographed him at the entrance, and I even had a few people asking if they could take photos of him too. Peter was quite happy to pose, but soon he went scampering off up the path towards Hilltop. It was quite thrilling to know that we were walking up the exact same path where Beatrix Potter had walked many times, past well-maintained flower beds that were looking colourful despite the dull weather, including some gorgeous tulips beaded with raindrops and a lovely peach-coloured azalea. Peter Rabbit headed first for the house and soon attracted the attention of the National Trust staff on duty, who became quite involved in the day's photo shoot. Not only were they happy for me to place Peter in different positions, they began suggesting places where I could put him. They were really lovely, though they might have been slightly bemused at a grown woman carrying a knitted rabbit round with her. The house itself is kept quite dark inside to protect all the furniture and other treasures, which are all the original things that Beatrix collected herself to put into her new home. If you stepped inside it today, it would all be very familiar to her, because it really hasn't changed. Although the darkness made photography a bit more difficult, it did make the house feel rather cosy, especially as there was a warm fire blazing, right where Beatrix herself would have sat in the cooler months, drawing, painting, and writing her stories, and glancing up to see her garden and the countryside beyond. A beautifully scenic ride through the vibrantly green countryside took us to the waterside pier in Ambleside, and our tour ended with a half-hour cruise on Windermere, something that Beatrix Potter herself very likely did when she came to the Lake District on holiday. We had atmospheric views of misty hills and mountains all around the lake. And it wasn't long before we arrived at Bowness Pier and we were dropped off at our bed and breakfast. My mum and I can both say that we would highly recommend this tour. Our driver and guide was absolutely brilliant. He was very knowledgeable and clearly spoken, and it's incredible just how much we did in 4.5 hours. So there we go. That's the trip so far. We actually had another couple of days, but I'll tell you more about them another time. Although I haven't got a lot more video because, in fact, the following day was Sunday, and I decided to have a complete photo and video free day. So it was just my mum and I, and not me rushing around trying to photograph things. We did have a really lovely day. I will tell you about that another time. But I did say I would tell you what I bought in the World of Beatrix Potter shop. So I did buy 3 things, and you won't be at all surprised if you've watched me before the first thing that I bought here. Apart from the fact that it has got Beatrix Potter illustrations on it, I love its shape as well. And I think I quite like this size of jug as well. I find them to be quite useful. And most of the jugs that I buy do get well used. So I can't wait to be using this one here. So that's the jug. And then I bought a little melamine tray, which I always find these useful. I do have a bit of a collection of them in all different sizes, but I'm going to enjoy using that one there. And then the final thing that I bought is a bag. So I know I have lots of bags, I know, and Phil always laughs at me whenever I buy a new bag and I say, yeah, but I haven't got one exactly this size and shape and design, so this will fill a particular need. So yes, well, okay, I was attracted to it because it had embroidery of the Beatrix Potter characters on it. But actually, I will find that useful. I liked it because it had a zip up the top. And when I'd been travelling on the bus and I had my knitting projects that I had with me just in a normal tote bag, and at one point it fell over and some of the things fell out on the bus floor. And I thought, yeah, I need something with a zip on. So this one has a zip on and it has a flat bottom, so it'll be perfect for if I'm travelling on public transport and I want to put my bag down and I don't want everything to fall over and tip out onto the floor. So that's my justification for buying another bag. Anyway, I'm going to stop there now, and I hope you've enjoyed coming with Mum and I on this little trip. And until I see you again, keep nice and busy, look after yourself, and I'll be back again very soon. Okay then, bye.